I died for 37 seconds in that hospital corridor. I felt my heart stop. I felt the cold seep into my bones like ice water filling my lungs. I felt my soul begin to detach from my body, pulled towards something dark, something hungry, something that had been waiting for me my entire life without me ever knowing it existed. But I am getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what happened that night. You need to understand why I will never be the same. You need to understand that the things lurking in the shadows of this world are more real than you could ever imagine. And the only thing standing between you and complete annihilation is a name, one single name spoken in absolute desperation. By the end of this story, you will know what I know, you will see what I saw, and you will never look at an empty hospital corridor the same way again. My name is Nova Chen, and I was 23 years old when I discovered that hell is not some distant place you go after death. Hell can find you right here on Earth. It can reach through the thin membrane between worlds and wrap its fingers around your throat while you are still breathing. It can whisper your name in the dark. It can show you things about yourself that you have spent your entire life trying to forget. And on the night of October 17th, hell came looking for me. I never wanted to be at St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. Something about that building had always felt wrong to me. Even as a child, I remember driving past it with my mother when I was 7 years old, and I would always press myself against the opposite car door, trying to put as much distance between myself and those gray walls as possible. My mother would laugh and tell me I was being dramatic. She would say it was just a building, just concrete and glass and fluorescent lights. She was wrong. I know that now. But at 23, I was trying to prove something to myself. I had struggled with fear my entire life. Fear of the dark, fear of being alone, fear of death. These fears had controlled me, limited me, kept me small and trembling in the corners of my own existence. So when my university required community service hours for my psychology degree, I chose the one place that frightened me most. I thought facing my fear would set me free. I had no idea it would nearly destroy me. My first few weeks as a volunteer at St. Augustine were uneventful. I worked the afternoon shift, helping nurses organize supplies, delivering flowers to patient rooms, sitting with elderly patients who had no family to visit them. The hospital during daylight hours was almost pleasant. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Families came and went with ballons and stuffed animals. Children laughed in the pediatric ward. It was easy to forget the strange feeling that crawled up my spine every time I walked through those automatic doors. But then Patricia asked me to cover her night shift. Patricia was another volunteer, a sweet woman in her 50s who had been working at St. Augustine for nearly a decade. Her daughter had gone into early labor, and she needed someone to take her Thursday night shift. Just one night, she said. Just a few hours of sitting at the volunteer desk, answering the occasional question, maybe restocking some supply closets. Nothing difficult. Nothing scary. I should have said no. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to refuse. When Patricia asked me, I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck, like invisible fingers warning me to stay away. But I had spent my whole life listening to those instincts, and where had it gotten me? Nowhere. I was tired of being afraid. I was tired of letting fear make my decisions. So I said yes. Thursday arrived faster than I expected. The day passed in a blur of classes and coffee and nervous anticipation. By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot at 10:30 that night, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the building in front of me. St. Augustine Memorial Hospital looked different at night. The gray concrete walls seemed darker, almost black in the shadows between the parking lot lights. Most of the windows were dark, but a few glowed with that sickly yellow fluorescent light that made everything look diseased. The emergency room entrance pulsed with red and blue reflections from an ambulance that had just arrived, the lights spinning silently like warning beacons. Go home, something whispered in my mind. Go home now. Do not go inside. I ignored the voice. I grabbed my bag, locked my car, and walked toward the volunteer entrance on the east side of the building. The automatic doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, and I was immediately hit with that smell. You know the smell I mean. Every hospital has it. Antiseptic and industrial cleaner and something underneath, something organic and unsettling. The smell of sickness. The smell of decay barely masked by chemicals. The smell of bodies fighting to stay alive and sometimes losing that fight. I signed in at the security desk. The guard on duty was a heavy-set man named Marcus, who I had seen a few times during my afternoon shifts. He looked surprised to see me. "Nava, what are you doing here so late?" "Covering for Patricia. Her daughter went into labor." Marcus frowned and something flickered across his face. Was it concern? Unease? At the time, I could not tell. Now I know exactly what it was. It was fear. "You be careful tonight," he said, and his voice was lower than usual. "Stay at the volunteer desk. Don't go wandering around." I laughed, trying to shake off the strange weight of his words. Where would I wander? It's a hospital, not a maze. Marcus did not laugh. He just looked at me with those dark eyes that had seen things I could not imagine, and he said, "Just stay at the desk, Nova. Some parts of this building, they don't like visitors after midnight." I told myself he was joking. I told myself he was just an old man trying to scare the new volunteer. I told myself there was nothing to worry about, that this was going to be an easy, boring shift, and by morning I would wonder why I had ever been nervous at all. I was a fool. The volunteer desk was located on the second floor in a small alcove near the elevator bank. I settled into the rolling chair, pulled out my psychology textbook, and tried to focus on studying for my upcoming exam. The hospital was quiet, quieter than I expected. Occasionally, a nurse would walk past, shoes squeaking softly on the linoleum floor. Once an orderly pushed an empty gurney down the hallway, the wheels rattling against the tile. But for the most part, I was alone. The hours crept by. 11 o'clock. 11:30. Quarter to 12. I was deep into a chapter about abnormal psychology, reading about the clinical definitions of paranoid delusion when I first heard it. A whisper, so faint I thought I had imagined it, just a brush of sound at the edge of my awareness, like wind through distant trees. I looked up from my textbook, scanning the empty hallway in front of me. Nothing. No one. Just the long corridor stretching away into shadows dotted with the occasional glow of exit signs. I went back to reading, but I could not concentrate anymore. Something had shifted in the air around me. The quality of silence had changed, become thicker, somehow more oppressive. I became aware of my own breathing, my own heartbeat, the soft rustle of my clothes every time I moved. Everything seemed louder now, amplified by the absence of other sounds. And then I heard it again. "Nova." My blood turned to ice. That was not my imagination. That was not the building settling or the heating system humming. That was a voice, a human voice. Someone had just whispered my name. I stood up slowly, my chair rolling backward and bumping against the wall. I looked left, then right. The hallway was empty in both directions. The elevator doors were closed. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. "Hello?" My voice came out thin and reedy, barely above a whisper myself. "Is someone there?" Silence. I swallowed hard, trying to calm my racing heart. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. Just my tired brain playing tricks on me. I had been nervous all day, and now my imagination was filling the quiet spaces with phantom sounds. That was all. That was the only explanation that made sense. I sat back down, but I did not pick up my textbook again. Instead, I kept my eyes on the hallway, watching, waiting. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a sound I had not noticed before but now seemed impossibly loud. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. 11:57, 11:58, 11:59. And then, as the minute hand clicked into place at 12, everything changed. The lights flickered. Not a gentle dimming, not a brief interruption. They flickered violently, strobing like lightning, casting the hallway in alternating flashes of harsh brightness and absolute darkness. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles going white. In those split-second moments of darkness, I could swear I saw something moving at the far end of the corridor, a shape, a silhouette, gone before my eyes could focus. Nova, the whisper came again, louder this time, clearer. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the walls and the floor and the ceiling, wrapping around me like smoke. Nova, come to me. I should have run. I should have grabbed my bag and sprinted for the exit and never looked back. That is what any sane person would have done. But something was happening to me, something I cannot fully explain. It was like my fear had reached such an intense peak that it flipped over into something else: curiosity, compulsion, an overwhelming need to know what was calling my name. I stepped out from behind the volunteer desk. My legs moved without my permission, carrying me toward the source of the sound. The fluorescent lights had stabilized, but they seemed dimmer now, their usual harsh glare softened to a sickly yellow glow. The hallway stretched before me, longer than I remembered, the perspective somehow wrong. The far end seemed too distant, like looking through the wrong end of a telescope. I passed empty patient rooms, their doors standing open, beds stripped of sheets and waiting for occupants who might never come. Some of the rooms had equipment inside, monitors and stands and ventilators, all dark and silent. In one room, I saw a wheelchair sitting in the corner, facing the window that overlooked the parking lot. I could have sworn it moved as I passed, the wheels shifting slightly, as if whoever sat in it had just turned to look at me. I kept walking. Nova, closer, come closer. The whisper pulled me forward like a hook in my chest. I wanted to resist. Part of me was screaming, begging myself to stop, to turn around, to run. But my body would not obey. I was a passenger in my own flesh, watching helplessly as I moved deeper and deeper into the hospital's dark heart. The corridor turned left, then right, then left again. I did not remember this many turns. I did not remember the hallway being this long. The exit signs grew farther apart, their red glow dimming until they were just faint embers in the gloom. The temperature dropped with every step I took, the air growing colder and colder until I could see my breath misting in front of my face. Doors began to slam. The first one made me scream. It was a patient room door about 20 feet behind me, and it crashed shut with such force that the sound echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there, no wind, no explanation. Just a closed door where an open one had been seconds before. Then another door slammed, and another, and another. They cascaded down the hallway like dominoes, one after another, each bang louder than the last. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, and with each slam, the corridor behind me grew darker, as if the doors were sealing off any escape route, any hope of return. I started to run. I ran forward because I could no longer go back. The hallway had become a gauntlet, the darkness chasing me, the doors slamming in a rhythm that matched my pounding heart. My feet slapped against the linoleum, my breath came in ragged gasps, my vision tunneled until all I could see was the path ahead, narrowing and twisting and leading me somewhere I did not want to go. And then I reached the end. The corridor terminated in a single door, different from all the others. It was older, made of heavy wood instead of the standard hospital laminate, with a brass handle that looked like it belonged in a building from another century. The wood was dark, almost black, and covered in what looked like scratches, not random marks, but deliberate gouges, as if someone had clawed at the door with their bare hands, trying desperately to get out, or trying desperately to get in. Nova, I have been waiting for you. The voice came from the other side of the door, deeper now, less human. It resonated in my chest, vibrated in my bones. Every instinct I had told me to turn around, to find another way out, to do anything except open that door. But the hallway behind me was completely dark now. The lights had all died, one by one, and the blackness that filled the corridor was not just absence of light. It was something else. Something solid and hungry and reaching for me with fingers made of shadow. I had no choice. I grabbed the brass handle. It was ice cold, so cold it burned my palm. I turned it. The door swung open. and I saw what had been calling my name. The room beyond was impossible. It was far too large, stretching away into darkness that swallowed any light. The walls were covered in something organic, something that glistened wetly in the faint glow that came from nowhere and everywhere. The floor was not linoleum but stone, cracked and ancient, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when I tried to look directly at them. And in the center of that nightmare room there was a figure. It stood at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. Its body was impossibly thin, limbs elongated and jointed in ways that defied human anatomy. It wore what might have once been clothing but now looked like tattered shadows clinging to a skeletal frame. Its fingers were too long, ending in points that could have been nails or could have been claws or could have been something for which there is no human word. But its face, oh God, its face. It had no features, no mouth, no nose, no ears, just two hollow spaces where eyes should have been, two dark pits that seemed to extend backward into infinity. And yet, somehow it was looking at me, seeing me, not just my body, not just my face, but everything, every secret I had ever kept, every sin I had ever committed, every moment of shame and guilt and fear that I had buried deep in the darkest corners of my soul. Nova, it said, and its voice was inside my head now, bypassing my ears entirely. I know you. I have always known you. I could not move. I could not breathe. I stood frozen in that doorway, trapped between the darkness behind me and the horror before me, my body refusing to respond to any command my terrified brain could form. Before we go any further, if you believe in Jesus, subscribe to my channel because we provide daily Jesus stories that change people's lives. What happened next is something I can barely put into words, but you need to hear it. You need to understand. The thing began to move toward me. It did not walk. It glided, its feet never quite touching the ground, its elongated body swaying with each forward motion like a snake rising from a basket. The temperature in the room plummeted even further. Frost began to form on the walls, crawling across the organic matter that covered them, crackling and spreading like a disease. You have carried so much fear, the thing said. I can taste it. Sweet and sharp and absolutely delicious. Do you know how long I have been feeding on your fear, Novate? Do you know how many nights I have stood at the foot of your bed, drinking in your nightmares while you slept? Memories flooded my mind. Nights when I had woken up gasping for air, certain that something was watching me. Mornings when I felt exhausted despite a full night's sleep, shadows in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned to look. All those years of unexplained dread, of feeling like something was wrong without ever knowing what. It had been this thing, this creature, feeding on me, harvesting my terror like a crop. But fear is just the appetizer, the thing continued, drifting closer. It was only 10 feet away now, then 8, then 6. Tonight, I will have the main course. Tonight, I will have your soul. It raised one of its impossibly long hands, fingers splayed, reaching toward my face. I could feel cold radiating from it, a cold that went deeper than flesh, deeper than bone, a cold that touched something essential at the core of my being. And then it showed me things. I cannot describe all of it. Some horrors are too vast, too complete, to be contained in human language. But I will try to tell you what I can. I saw my father. He had died when I was 12 years old. A car accident on a rainy night. I had never gotten to say goodbye. I had been angry at him that day, angry over something so petty I cannot even remember what it was, and my last words to him had been spoken in hatred. That guilt had eaten at me for years, a wound that never healed. The thing showed me my father's face, twisted in disappointment and rage. He died hating you, it whispered. His last thought was of what a terrible daughter you were. He drove into that truck because part of him wanted to escape you. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. But in that moment, standing before that creature of darkness, the lie felt more real than any truth I had ever known. I felt the words carve into my heart like knives, reopening old scars, making me bleed grief and shame. No, I whimpered. That's not true. Isn't it? You've always believed it. Deep down, in the places you never let yourself look. I saw my mother. She was crying alone in her house, the house I had not visited in months because I was too busy with my own life. The thing showed me her loneliness, her disappointment, the way she sometimes looked at my photograph and wondered where she had gone wrong. She regrets having you, the thing said. All those years of sacrifice, and for what? A daughter who cannot even pick up the phone. More lies, more poison. But it was working. I could feel myself crumbling, my sense of self dissolving under the assault. Everything I believed about who I was, everything I held on to for strength and stability, was being systematically demolished. The thing showed me more. Every cruel word I had ever spoken, every selfish choice I had ever made, every person I had hurt, intentionally or accidentally, every failure, every flaw, every dark impulse I had ever felt. It laid my soul bare and examined each ugly piece with clinical precision, and then it fed those pieces back to me, magnified 1,000 times. You are worthless, it said. You are broken. You are alone in a universe that does not care whether you live or die. And soon you will belong to me forever. Its hand touched my forehead. The cold that entered me was beyond anything I had ever experienced. It was not the cold of winter or ice or even space. It was the cold of absence, of nothingness, of an eternity spent screaming in a void where no one could hear. I felt my heart stutter in my chest. I felt my lungs forget how to breathe. I felt my soul begin to peel away from my body, pulled toward those empty eye sockets like water spiraling down a drain. I was dying. No, I was worse than dying. I was being unmade, erased from existence, devoured by something older than human history, something that had been feeding on suffering since before the first civilizations rose from the mud. And in that moment, in that infinite instant of absolute terror and despair, I remembered something, a Sunday school lesson from when I was a child, a teacher with kind eyes and a gentle voice, telling us about the power that exists in the name above all names. I had not thought about that lesson in years. I had drifted away from faith as I grew older, too busy and too skeptical to maintain the simple belief of my childhood. But now, facing annihilation, those words came floating back. There is a name that demands fear, a name that makes the darkness tremble, a name that carries more power than all the forces of evil combined. I did not think. I did not plan. I simply opened my mouth, using the last breath in my failing lungs, and I screamed, "God, please save me, Jesus, help mech." The effect was instantaneous. Light exploded through the room, not fluorescent light, not electric light, but something else entirely. Pure, radiant, overwhelming light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was warm and golden and impossibly gentle, wrapping around me like arms, filling the spaces where the cold had tried to take root. The creature screamed. It was not a human scream. It was not even a sound that belonged in this world. It was a shriek of rage and pain and something that sounded almost like fear, torn from whatever served as that thing's throat. The entity recoiled, its elongated body twisting and contorting, its shadow flesh smoking and burning where the light touched it. "No!" it howled. "She is mine. I have cultivated her for years. She belongs to me." But the light only grew brighter. It pushed outward from where I knelt on the cold stone floor, driving the darkness back inch by inch. I watched as the organic matter on the walls withered and dried and crumbled away. I watched as the symbols on the floor faded into nothing. I watched as the impossible room began to shrink, contracting back toward normal dimensions. And I watched as the creature that had almost claimed my soul was driven back toward whatever hell had spawned it. "This is not over," it screamed. "I will find you again. I will wait for you in the dark. Your protection cannot last forever." But even as it spoke those words, its voice was growing fainter, its form becoming less substantial. The empty holes where its eyes had been flickered and dimmed. Its body lost cohesion, dissolving into wisps of shadow that the light consumed completely. And then it was gone. I collapsed onto the floor, my body shaking uncontrollably. The tears came then, pouring down my face in rivers, released from whatever dam had been holding them back. I sobbed with my whole body, gasping and heaving, overwhelmed by a mixture of terror and relief and something else, something I could not immediately identify. Gratitude. That was what it was. Overwhelming, soul-deep gratitude. I had been seconds away from eternal damnation. I had felt my soul being pulled from my body, had tasted the beginning of an endless suffering, and in that moment of absolute hopelessness, when all human strength had failed, divine intervention had saved me. I do not know how long I lay there on that floor. Time had lost all meaning. But eventually, I became aware that the room around me had changed. It was no longer the nightmare chamber of organic walls and ancient symbols. It was just a regular hospital room, small and square and utterly mundane. The door behind me was a standard hospital door, white laminate and silver handle. The walls were painted the same pale green as every other room in the building. I was back. I was safe. I pulled myself to my feet on trembling legs. My whole body ached as if I had run a marathon. My throat was raw from screaming. My eyes burned from crying, but I was alive. I was still here. I was still me. I staggered out of the room and back down the corridor. It was just a normal hospital hallway now, well lit and quiet, the doors all standing open exactly as they should be. No darkness chased me. No voices whispered my name. The oppressive weight that had filled the air was gone, replaced by ordinary stillness. When I reached the volunteer desk, I collapsed into the chair and did not move until dawn. The night shift nurses found me there at 6 in the morning when they came to check on the volunteers. I must have looked terrible because they immediately started fussing over me, checking my vital signs, asking if I was sick. I told them I was fine, just tired, just had not slept well. They did not believe me, but they did not push. I never told anyone what really happened that night. Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself. In the light of day, with the sun streaming through the windows and the normal bustle of hospital life going on around me, the whole experience seemed like a fever dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. But I knew it was real. I knew because things were different after that night. Things inside me had changed. The fear that had plagued me my entire life was gone, not diminished, not managed, but gone. I could walk into dark rooms without hesitation. I could be alone without feeling watched. The shadows that had always seemed to contain hidden threats were just shadows now, ordinary and unthreatening. And I knew something else was different too, something about the hospital itself. In the weeks and months that followed, the atmosphere at St. Augustine Memorial shifted. Nurses who had worked there for decades commented on it. The building felt lighter, they said, more peaceful. Patients recovered faster. Staff turnover decreased. The strange incidents that had always plagued the night shift, the unexplained sounds and moved objects and feelings of dread, stopped completely. I had not just been saved that night. Something had been driven out, something that had been feeding on the fear and suffering of everyone who passed through those walls. My desperate prayer had not only rescued my soul, but had cleansed the entire building. Or maybe that is just what I tell myself. Maybe I need to believe that my terror served some greater purpose, that the worst night of my life had meaning beyond my own survival. But here is what I know for certain. There are things in this world that exist beyond human understanding, forces of darkness that prey on the vulnerable, that grow strong on fear and despair. They are patient. They are ancient. They will wait years, decades, lifetimes for the right opportunity to claim their prey. And against those forces, human strength is nothing. Human courage is nothing. Human willpower, determination, intelligence, all of it means nothing in the face of true evil. But there is a power greater than darkness. There is a name that carries authority over every demon, every shadow, every creature that crawls in the spaces between worlds. And when that name is invoked, when it is called upon with sincere faith and desperate need, miracles happen. I am living proof. 5 years have passed since that night at St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. I finished my psychology degree, But I did not pursue the career I had originally planned. Instead, I went back to school, studied theology, and now I work as a counselor at a church in my hometown. I spend my days talking to people who are struggling, who are afraid, who feel lost in the darkness of their own lives, and I tell them my story. Not always the whole thing. Some people are not ready for that. But I tell them enough. I tell them that I faced something terrible, something I could not overcome on my own. I tell them that in my darkest moment I called out to God, and He answered. I tell them that no matter how deep the darkness seems, no matter how hopeless the situation appears, divine light can reach them. Every single person has access to that power. You do not need to be special. You do not need to be holy or righteous or without sin. You just need to call on the name with faith. Just ask sincerely and desperately, and help will come. I know because I was the most frightened, broken, unworthy person imaginable when I cried out that night. I had drifted from faith. I had ignored God for years. I had made countless mistakes and harbored countless sins. But none of that mattered in the moment of crisis. The divine protection came anyway, swift and powerful and absolute. That is grace. That is mercy. That is love beyond human comprehension. Do I still think about that creature sometimes? Yes. I would be lying if I said I had completely forgotten the terror of that night. Sometimes, late at night, I remember those empty eyes staring into my soul. I remember the cold touch on my forehead. I remember the feeling of my existence beginning to dissolve. But I also remember what happened after. I remember the light. I remember the warmth. I remember the certain knowledge that I was protected, loved, claimed by something infinitely more powerful than the darkness that had tried to claim me. And that memory is stronger. The fear no longer controls me. When those old memories surface, I do not push them away or try to suppress them. I hold them up to the light, examine them, and let them remind me of what I have learned. The darkness is real, yes. Evil exists. But good is more powerful. Love is more powerful. Faith is more powerful. Always. I have thought a lot about why that creature targeted me specifically, why it had been feeding on my fear for years before making its move. I have some theories, but I cannot be certain of any of them. May it sensed something vulnerable in me, some crack in my spiritual armor that it could exploit. Maybe it was drawn to my unresolved grief over my father's death, the guilt and shame that I had never properly processed. Maybe it simply saw an opportunity, a young woman alone in a hospital at midnight, isolated and afraid. Or maybe I was just one of many. Maybe there are creatures like that attached to thousands of people, millions of people, feeding on fear and waiting for their moment. May most people never encounter their darkness directly because most people never put themselves in situations that allow the veil between worlds to thin. That is a terrifying thought. But it is also strangely comforting, because if darkness can attach itself to anyone, then anyone can also call upon the light. The protection I received is not special to me. It is available to everyone, everywhere, always. All you have to do is ask. I went back to St. Augustine Memorial Hospital once, about a year after that night. I told myself I was just visiting, just checking in on the place where my life had changed forever. But really, I needed to see it again. I needed to confirm that the nightmare was over. I walked those corridors in the middle of the afternoon, surrounded by doctors and nurses and patients and families. I looked at the walls and floors and ceilings, searching for any trace of what had happened. I found none. It was just a hospital, ordinary and mundane, doing its ordinary and mundane work of healing the sick. But when I reached the spot where that impossible door had appeared, I stopped. For a moment, just the briefest moment, I thought I felt something, a distant echo, a fading memory, a whisper of what had once been there, not malevolent, not threatening, just residual, like the fading warmth of a fire that had burned out long ago. And then even that was gone. I walked out of St. Augustine Memorial Hospital and never went back again. That chapter of my life is closed now. The darkness has moved on to other hunting grounds, or perhaps has been banished to whatever realm of punishment awaits entities of pure evil. Either way, it is no longer my concern. My concern now is helping others find the light. If you have read this far, if you have followed my story to this moment, then you are not here by accident. Something drew you to these words. Something made you keep reading even when the horror made you uncomfortable, even when the details made you want to look away. Maybe you are facing your own darkness. Maybe you feel like something is watching you, feeding on your fear, waiting for its chance to strike. Maybe you have tried everything you can think of to escape the shadows, and nothing has worked. I want you to know that you are not alone. I want you to know that there is hope. I want you to know that the power that saved me on that terrible night is available to you right now in this very moment. All you have to do is call out. All you have to do is ask me. It does not require fancy words, or perfect faith, or a lifetime of religious devotion. It just requires sincerity. It just requires need. When you reach the end of yourself, when you have nothing left but desperation, that is when miracles happen. I know because I lived it. I died for 37 seconds in that hospital corridor, my heart stopped by a touch from beyond the grave, my soul halfway to an eternity of suffering. And then I called on the name of Jesus, and everything changed. The darkness can be defeated. The shadows cannot hold you forever. There is always, always hope. My name is Chen, and I was saved by a miracle, not because I deserved it, not because I earned it, but because I asked for it in the moment when asking was all I had left. Type Amen if you believe in miracles. Type Amen if you have felt the darkness pressing close and want to know that light exists. Type Amen if this story has touched something in your heart, something that recognizes the truth of what I am saying, because miracles are real. Divine protection is real, and no matter how dark the night becomes, morning always comes to those who hold on to faith. I am proof, and so are you.